No matter how helpful they can be, advanced technology and heavy machinery carry a dangerous side. When safety measures fail, the consequences can be fatal for human beings. Join us as we uncover the chilling stories of workers who paid the ultimate price when a single malfunction turned routine tasks into deadly incidents. It was the early hours of November 5, 1983. On the deck of the Bifford Dolphin oil rig, saturation divers Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, Björn G. Bergerson, and Truls Hellick were just returning from the icy depths of the North Sea, having completed another grueling assignment. These men were veterans of the extreme team, accustomed to the treacherous cold, the pitch-black waters, and the deadly pressure of life hundreds of feet beneath the surface. Above them, dive tenders William Crammond and Martin Saunders worked methodically, securing the diving bell and ensuring the pressurized chambers remained sealed. Everything seemed routine, almost mundane, until it wasn't. Saturation diving is considered one of the deadliest professions on Earth. At depths reaching 500 to 1,000 feet, normal breathing is impossible. Divers survive thanks to specialized gas mixtures, helium and oxygen, and live inside hyperbaric chambers that mimic the crushing pressures of the deep. This system allows them to work and rest at depth for weeks, sometimes up to 28 days, avoiding the dangerous process of decompression after each dive. When the job is done, a slow, meticulous ascent begins, gradually returning their bodies to normal atmospheric pressure. It's a process that leaves no room for error. One mistake can be fatal. That morning, everything that could go wrong did. The diving bell had just returned to the rig, and the divers were moving back into the living chambers through a short passage called the trunk. Inside, Edwin Coward and Roy Lucas were already resting. Bergerson and Hellick were just stepping in. Crammond and Saunders were assisting as usual, but in a moment that would become history, the unthinkable happened. The clamp securing the diving bell meant to hold the immense pressure safely was released too soon. In an instant, the air inside the chambers dropped from 9 atmospheres to 1. The sudden shift was catastrophic. Inside, the divers had no warning. The nitrogen dissolved and their blood expanded violently, forming gas bubbles that ripped through tissue and organs. Their bodies essentially boiled from within. Coward, Lucas, and Bergerson were killed instantly, their deaths swift but horrifyingly absolute. Truls Hellick's fate was even more gruesome. Standing closest to the partially open chamber door, he was violently sucked through the narrow gap. His body was torn apart by the force of the decompression, internal organs expelled across the rig's deck. Pieces of him were found scattered as far as 10 meters away, perched atop the rig itself. It was instantaneous, merciful in its suddenness, yet unimaginably horrifying. Crammond, the tender who had accidentally released the clamp, was struck by the diving bell hurled by the blast of escaping air. He died immediately. Saunders survived but was left with severe injuries, the chaos of that morning etched into his memory forever. Investigators later revealed that exhaustion likely played a role. Crammond had been working a grueling 12-hour shift, but human error alone didn't cause this catastrophe. The Bifford Dolphin's pressurization system was critically flawed, lacking fail-safes that could have prevented the trunk from being opened while still under pressure. A deadly combination of fatigue and flawed machinery had turned routine procedure into a nightmare. It took 26 years for the Norwegian government, operators of the rig, to acknowledge responsibility and provide compensation. By then, the Bifford Dolphin had become a chilling symbol of one of the deadliest accidents in the history of deep-sea diving, a tragedy that changed the industry forever, leaving a haunting reminder of how quickly life can be torn apart when human error meets the unforgiving force of nature. It was September 30th, 1999, in the quiet town of Tokaimura, Japan. What seemed like an ordinary morning would soon become a nightmare that would haunt the lives of 3 men forever. Hasashi Uchi, Masato Shinohara, and their supervisor, Utaka Yokokawa, were working at the local nuclear fuel plant, performing a task that, on the surface, looked routine but carried a hidden danger none of them fully understood. Uchi, 35, and Shinohara, 40, were preparing uranium-enriched fuel in a small, cramped facility. Yokokawa watched from his desk, roughly 14 feet away, unaware that what was about to unfold would defy the boundaries of human endurance. The uranium they were handling was enriched far beyond their training, 18.8% compared to the typical 3.5%, making it extraordinarily volatile. Yet critical safety protocols were ignored. No one had been properly trained for this level of danger. At 10:35 a.m., disaster struck. Uchi leaned over a precipitation tank, funnel in hand, while the Shinohara poured uranium oxide directly from a stainless steel beaker, a shortcut adopted by the company without consulting safety experts. The tank quickly became overloaded, holding 7 times the recommended limit. Then, suddenly, an intense blue-white flash lit up the room. A nuclear chain reaction had begun. Panic gripped them. The 3 men ran, stumbling from the facility, but it was too late. Nausea, burning pain, and confusion overtook them within minutes. Even Yokokawa, sitting far from the blast, was affected by the invisible wave of deadly radiation. Emergency teams rushed the men to the hospital, but the damage had already been done. Radiation began spreading through the plant and into the surrounding area, and emergency protocols lagged behind the unfolding crisis. By the time the reaction was finally halted, 20 hours later, hundreds had been exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. For Hasashi Uchi, closest to the tank, the nightmare had only begun. He had absorbed an unprecedented dose of 17 sieverts, far above the fatal threshold. His skin burned and began peeling. His immune system collapsed, leaving him helpless against infections. Doctors tried everything: experimental stem cell transplants, skin grafts, blood transfusions, but nothing could reverse the damage. For 83 excruciating days, Uchi's body disintegrated before the eyes of medical staff and his family. Each heart attack, each organ failure, raised agonizing ethical questions. How far should medical intervention go when suffering is unbearable? Yet his family insisted on keeping him alive. On December 21, 1999, Hasashi Uchi succumbed to the radiation, leaving behind a story of unimaginable pain and tragedy. Masato Shinohara, standing beside him during the accident, endured a similarly horrific fate. Though exposed to slightly less radiation, around 10 sieverts, his body was ravaged from within. Over months of relentless suffering, his organs failed one by one, and in April 2000, he too passed away, nearly 7 months after that fateful morning. Yokokawa, farther from the initial blast, received a lower dose around 3 sieverts. He survived, but only after months of hospitalization and agonizing recovery. Even after surviving, he faced legal consequences, charged with negligence alongside 5 other employees. The plant and company were forced to pay millions in compensation, as thousands of residents had been exposed to dangerous radiation. In total, over 10,000 people were tested, and the incident sparked a sweeping reevaluation of Japan's nuclear safety regulations. In February 2012, Erica Marshall was living her dream. At just 28, she was a newlywed, radiant with ambition, and on the cusp of what promised to be a stellar career in equine rehabilitation. Horses had always been at the center of her life. Growing up in Medford, New Jersey, Erica's fascination with their strength and grace inspired her to pursue a degree in equine science at Hartpury College in Gloucester, England. It was there that she met her future husband, Kieran, a man who shared not only her love for animals but her unwavering dedication to their care. Their bond was both professional and deeply personal, and in November 2011, they married, eager to begin a new chapter together in Florida. Erica quickly secured her dream position at the Kentucky Equine Sports Medicine and Rehabilitation Center, a facility renowned for helping injured horses recover using cutting-edge techniques. One of the most advanced treatments she oversaw was hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a method designed to accelerate healing by placing animals in pressurized chambers filled with enriched oxygen. For 2 years, Erica had monitored these sessions flawlessly, guiding horses safely through the process and celebrating the small victories that each recovery brought. On that seemingly ordinary February morning, the horse being treated had undergone the procedure successfully many times before, It was calm, alert, and unmedicated. Nothing in its behavior suggested danger, but that day, a subtle shift changed everything. Something in the horse's mind snapped. Perhaps fear, perhaps instinct, and it suddenly became agitated. Panic surged through it as it began to kick violently against the chamber walls. The padded interior, meant to protect both horse and human, offered little resistance to the force of steel-clad hooves striking relentlessly. Sparks flew as metal scraped against metal. And then, in that oxygen-rich environment, the unthinkable happened. The chamber erupted in a massive explosion. The force of the blast ripped apart the structure, sending debris flying over 200 feet and shaking the surrounding buildings. The deafening roar echoed for miles, a terrifying announcement that a catastrophe had unfolded. Erica, monitoring the horse from a nearby room through a video feed, had no chance to react. The explosion claimed her life instantly, leaving her colleagues and loved ones in stunned disbelief. Monali, a 33-year-old visitor from Ireland, was also caught in the blast, sustaining critical injuries that required an emergency airlift to a nearby hospital for immediate surgery. The aftermath was a scene of chaos and heartbreak. Kieran, who had only recently begun building a life alongside his wife, was left to grapple with the unimaginable, the sudden, violent loss of his partner, his best friend, and the love of his life. Friends and co-workers, too, were left reeling, struggling to comprehend how someone so vibrant, talented, and full of promise could be taken in an instant. As investigators combed through the wreckage, disturbing details emerged. The hyperbaric chamber had been experiencing technical problems for weeks prior to the incident. Warnings from staff about malfunctions were largely ignored, and the machine continued to be used without proper repairs or inspection. What should have been a routine procedure had been transformed into a deadly trap by a combination of mechanical failure and human oversight. The explosion raised profound questions about responsibility and safety. How could a life so full of promise be extinguished so suddenly? Lawsuits followed, targeting both the chamber's manufacturers and the rehabilitation facility itself. Allegations focused on negligence, the design flaws of the chamber, failures in maintenance, and lapses in inspection protocols. The tragedy became a chilling reminder of how fragile safety can be when warnings are dismissed and technology fails catastrophically. Erica's death was more than a personal loss. It was a stark warning to the industry. She had been doing what she loved, helping animals recover, believing in the tools and systems that were supposed to keep her safe. Instead, those tools turned deadly. Her story is a haunting testament to the unpredictability of life and the devastating consequences when human error meets mechanical failure, an indelible reminder that even the most passionate and careful professionals can be swept away in a single, horrific moment. On January 25, 1979, Robert Williams, a 25-year-old factory worker, went to work like any other day, unaware that it would be his last. His job was straightforward, or so it seemed. He operated a parts retrieval system, a role he shared with a massive robotic arm, designed to move car castings from high-density storage shelves with mechanical precision. On paper, the system was flawless. In reality, it would become a lethal machine. Williams was no stranger to the fast-paced, often hazardous environment of the factory floor. He had worked alongside robots before, understanding the risks, respecting the machines. But the robotic arm he worked with that day, built by the Unit Handling Systems division of Litton Industries, was not just large, it was a ton of steel, designed to lift and swing with immense force. Its very sophistication, meant to optimize efficiency, would become the fatal flaw. Earlier that day, a minor malfunction had caused the robot to slow down in its routine, delaying production. Williams was asked to intervene, to manually retrieve parts from the shelving unit. It seemed simple, routine, safe, but the danger was invisible, lurking in the machine's blind spot. As Williams climbed into the shelves, the robotic arm continued its operation, unaware of the human now in its path. In a terrifying instant, the arm swung with unstoppable force. Williams never saw it coming. The crushing blow struck him from behind, killing killing him instantly, and then the unimaginable half an hour passed, and the arm continued its task as if nothing had happened. Williams's body lay hidden among the shelves while production carried on, the relentless rhythm of the machines oblivious to the life it had taken. It wasn't until his colleagues noticed his absence that the grim reality came into focus. The factory floor fell silent as they discovered Robert Williams, lifeless and crushed, the horrifying truth sinking in. Investigations revealed the stark truth. The robotic system had failed to recognize Williams as anything more than an object. To the machine, he was indistinguishable from the parts. It moved an expendable element in its precise, unyielding routine. In the wake of the tragedy, Williams' family filed a lawsuit against Litton Industries, arguing that the robot lacked critical safety measures, particularly in the zones where it moved with lethal force. The court ruled in their favor, awarding $10 million. But beyond legal accountability, Williams's death marked a chilling turning point in humanity's relationship with technology. It was a stark, unforgettable reminder that progress can be deadly when safety fails to keep pace, and that even the most advanced machines cannot account for the vulnerability of human life. Even the most routine tasks can turn deadly in industrial workplaces. On February 9th, 2019, Daniel Hill, a 54-year-old worker at Michigan Seamless Tube, a steel manufacturing plant in South Lyon, Michigan, faced a tragedy that would leave a lasting scar on his family, colleagues, and community. Known affectionately as Moose to those who knew him, Hill was more than just a worker. He was a husband, a father, and a mentor. He carried the discipline of his military service in the Army, where he had honed skills in the motor pool, into civilian life, earning respect for his diligence, integrity, and quiet determination. Outside the factory walls, Hill's life was defined by his love of the outdoors. He cherished hunting and fishing, and his home was filled with the laughter of his 3 dogs. Recently, he and his wife Pamela had moved into a tranquil countryside home, where deer wandered the property and life seemed calm and secure, a stark contrast to the day's impending horror. That Saturday began like any other, with routine checks and procedures designed to maintain safety and quality at the plant. Hill was tasked with inspecting a vat containing a 10 to 12% sulfuric acid solution, heated to at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The chemical, essential for strengthening steel pipes, was unforgiving. Even a momentary lapse in attention could prove catastrophic. The vat stood 8 feet deep, a boiling pit of corrosive liquid that could strip flesh in seconds. To an observer, the task appeared mundane, almost routine, but in the world of industrial work, routine can be deadly. As Hill leaned over the vat to complete the check, a slip changed everything. Time seemed to collapse in an instant. He fell, plunging into the scalding, chemical-laden liquid. The scream that escaped him was drowned out by the roar of machinery, but those nearby witnessed a nightmare unfolding in real time. Co-workers rushed to his aid, their instincts overriding the fear of burns and injury. Hands blistered and burned as they struggled to pull him from the vat, working against the chemical's searing assault. Hill emerged alive, but his entire body was engulfed in deep chemical burns. Every second counted, and in a desperate bid to save him, colleagues guided him to a safety shower, drenching him in water to wash away the corrosive acid before paramedics arrived. Even as Hill remained conscious, speaking between gasps of pain, the severity of his injuries became increasingly clear. Emergency crews transported him to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor, where doctors worked tirelessly, battling against the clock and the devastation wrought by the acid. Yet, despite their relentless efforts, the injuries were too severe, and at around 11:30 p.m., Daniel Hill succumbed to his burns. The news reverberated through his family, who were left to mourn the sudden, violent loss of a husband and father, and the community, which struggled to process the tragedy. The impact extended beyond his family. Colleagues who had risked their own safety to save him were haunted by the ordeal, grappling with the helplessness of watching a friend fight a battle they could not win. Neighbors who had welcomed Hill and Pamela to their countryside community with open arms were stunned by the loss of a quiet, kind man who had looked forward to building a peaceful life. Investigations by the Michigan Occupational Safety Safety and Health Administration underscored the sobering reality of industrial work. Even with safety measures in place, hazards remain, lurking in plain sight. Michigan Seamless Tube issued statements expressing deep sorrow and pledged full cooperation with the inquiry. But lingering questions remained. How could a routine inspection turn fatal? Could safeguards have prevented this tragedy?